if I could have your attention, and I certainly don't blame you for animated conversations, because I think we've had an extraordinary first day, not to mention the friendships and renewed relationships that took place, and new ones for that matter, last evening, which I think was pretty glorious, and we were very lucky on weather as we are right now. So, as I said, from where I was sitting, it was an extraordinary first day. And I hope you feel as we do, that we have like-minded folks here. Many of you have returned on 3 or 4 different occasions. We're really building a tradition here. We love having alumni of this enterprise coming back each year. So, and for those new folks and our Taiwanese friends, our South Korean friends, and others, we are delighted to have them as part of this enterprise, which, as you know, we will be making an annual event. So, that said, it is a distinct pleasure to be having the task, although I don't view it as a task, of introducing Lieutenant General Thomas James. He serves as you probably know, Deputy Commander of U.S. Space Command. For those unfamiliar with its mission, it's the Unified Combatant Command responsible for conducting operations in and from space. In short, his mandate is to deter and, if necessary, defeat aggressors in space, notably China and Russia. And those latter words are mine and weren't in his bio. So a little editorializing there, but let's be clear as to the genesis of the threat to space, and we're not afraid to say so. General James has a long and distinguished record of previous general officer assignments, which I urge you to look over in your brochures. Once upon a time, he enlisted in the Mississippi National Guard in a Special Forces unit and was commissioned while finishing his bachelor's degree in molecular biology, what I would call a man of many parts. He entered active duty as a U.S. Army aviator, but to try to go through his ascendancy in the U.S. military would be a fool's errand, because it would deny us any opportunity to have dinner. It's a great story, but a little too long for this venue. But I will say that he served valiantly in Afghanistan and in Desert Storm, among other capacities, attack helicopter units. He was very much in harm's way, and indeed he regaled us with some of his battlefield anecdotes during this morning's panel discussion. Finally, General James has what I would term an intense educational background, including the Harvard Senior Executive Fellowship Program. His awards and decorations are likewise too numerous to name here, but I dare say his finest and most coveted award is his lovely wife, Nicole, who is joining us and just couldn't be more delighted. So it is therefore both an honor and privilege to present to you as this evening's keynote speaker, a true warfighter and a great American, Lieutenant General Thomas L. James. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for what you do here. And I said it earlier today, I didn't really understand the depth of expertise, the depth of knowledge, the depth of problem sets that you're working here, and it really is phenomenal. And when I look at the faces out here, most of the faces, I don't know about Doug Lavero, but phenomenal folks. I had a great opportunity to work for a lot of you. You talked yesterday in the opening at the social about a lot of friendly faces here. I had a great opportunity to work for Mr. Lavero, learn the policy side of business in the Pentagon. Pete Hayes, I think, is here. Yeah, he was my instructor for a little while when I was at the Center of Air Power Thought at Chenault Circle at Air University in Montgomery. But it's a long time ago, and I hope it's long enough he doesn't remember my grades and that doesn't come up in conversation. But so a lot of faces here that I've had an opportunity to work with Mr. Pace before, and really a great opportunity. I'm going to move in here closer to the middle, just so in case something happens, I got protection all around me. So the thought of what we're going to talk about, and I'm sorry, here, I'll get over this way a little bit. Strategic partnerships and teaming. General Whiting talks about, and I mentioned it earlier today, that space is absolutely a team sport. I mean, there's no way around that. You can't succeed alone as a nation, as a service organization. You just can't get there. There are even things like NASA, which have done incredible, amazing things. But when you begin to pull apart all the different pieces of NASA, it's extensive. And NASA is one of the partners that we work with. So I named my little spiel today, space is a team sport. I get credit from my boss for doing that, so make sure you mention that if you see him. But I think it's important. And when you think of team sports, how do you make that connection with space? That's what I'll try to hit today in just a few minutes and not take too long to do it, but I think it's interesting. Hey, when I found out I was coming to Prague, never been here, never been to the Czech Republic. I've worked a lot with people from this area over the last few decades. And so I did a little bit of research and thinking a little bit about what we're going to talk about here. Did you know that Prague has a football team? Now, wait a minute. I don't mean the round ball football. I mean the squished American-style football, and I didn't know that. And actually, the team is pretty good. I just checked their record. They might be struggling a little bit this year, but they are a dynasty in what they do. And I think there's some lessons to learn about expert teams like that. I grew up in the South with football, SEC, the only real conference, sorry for everybody else. They don't always win. But my dad graduated from Alabama Medical School. And so I had to grow up rooting for Alabama, which is interesting because one of my degrees we didn't talk about there, thank goodness, is Auburn. And so there's a house divided right there, War Eagle. But you look at Tennessee and those teams, what can you learn from those teams? Florida, Georgia, my goodness gracious, and Stetson Bennett and that type of work. And then you look at the National Football League. We had the Super Bowl not all that long ago. We had Kansas City Chiefs won. 123 million U.S. people tuned in to watch the Super Bowl. How do we get that kind of excitement for space? We're going to get there. And actually we did, because there's only one event in history of the television, which is not that far back, that exceeded that number of people viewing an event on television. Happened in 1969 on my mother's birthday. Not because of my mother's birthday. That was just a coincidence. But Neil Armstrong walked on the surface of the moon. And let's be real, for anybody that was paying attention, that wasn't just because of the football. It might have had a little something to do with Taylor Swift. I'm not sure, which is awesome. But you look at you called that. I was going to go there. That's good. Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, tremendous defensive player. And then you've got Travis Kelce, who is known, of course, for being Taylor Swift's boyfriend. And he has a side hustle of being a tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, that's enough Taylor Swift jokes. Huge fan anyway. That's maybe a closet Swiftie. We don't know. But what is there to learn from those teams? If you go back and talk and listen to some of the things that Bear Bryant, for those of you that aren't that familiar with the Southeastern Conference, you're supposed to be like a hushed moment when we say Bear Bryant's name and maybe pull out a plaid hat. But he talked about Alabama is not about having players win the Heisman, They are about teams winning national championships. And I think that says a lot about, we've got teams here, and we've got individuals that have tremendous expertise. How do we not miss the opportunity and the value to bring all that together so you get that synergistic effect? I think that's a big deal. And so this is, we're talking about space as a team sport. We'll look at U.S. Spacecom and what are some of the things that we've done from U.S. Spacecom's perspective, working with partners to build those strengths and organizational partnerships that really have a big advantage to us. I've talked about a lot of these already this morning, so I'll kind of hit them a little bit, but I want to go over them again just to think about some of the things we've done that are really important to U.S. Spacecom, to the United States military, to the United States government, and to a lot of you in this room here, our allies, commercial partners, et cetera. And when you talk the allied piece, I think the big things we start with are the coalition or the Combined Space Operations Initiative, which has really been tremendous. 10 partners now and growing pretty rapidly. And I think that's an opportunity for us to look at information sharing, common goals. How do we manage resources as we move into the future to be most, not just efficient, but effective in how we look at potentially countering threats that we see? And even without regard to the threats, how do we just maximize how we use space capabilities, period? I think it's, we're making a lot of headway there. Another organization that we have that brings allies together is Operation Olympic Defender. We talked about that today. I think it's a smaller group, a little more advanced in how we get at some of the things. Where is my good friend Paul Tedman? Oh, good day, mate. No, sorry, that's Australia. Went the wrong way. Hey, bloke. Very serious, and what a tremendous job he did as a member of U.S. Space Command in our J5 section. And what I loved about the way that Paul shows what integrated really means. What does it mean to be an integrated part of a team? When someone would go looking for the British L&O or we need a UK perspective on something, they would go to Paul Tedman and he says, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm a Yank. He was part of the, maybe a little different words, but he was absolutely part of our team and we embedded him as much as we could and he embraced that fully. And I saw tremendous benefits and advantages and I see it today. From those experiences and what that's going to allow and help you to do in the future to keep our coalition work together. And so just an example of how that can be really, really powerful. I also talked about the fact that we shared the same unit for a while, another partnership with Special Operations Aviation, which obviously takes us to space because we were the original low Earth orbiters at about 300 to 500 feet off the ground. We didn't use Kepler. It was more Newtonian physics, but anyway. Great experience there. We talked about a couple of exercises we've done recently that really highlights the coalition and allied piece of work that we've done. And that's Global Sentinel in Vandenberg and then Nimble Titan. Both of those organizations have 25 different national partners. It's not the same 25. There's some overlap, but you think about we're really starting to grow that piece out. And the allies are completely on board with that. And I think that from what I've seen in just the last 5 or 6 years, that's continued to grow. We're getting better. It gives a forum for us to allow us to have the right conversations, continue to improve how we work. Could go on and on about allies, but let's talk a little because dinner's being held up, so I'm gonna try to get through this. Let's shift to commercial. Before we leave allies, the thing I would use to make the transition is policy. We talked earlier today in a couple of panels about policy may be one of the most difficult things we have to get through. Well, that's a silly saying. It feels right, but we control that to some level. I mean, the governments control how we do policy, but there is a gap in there of how we understand what the impacts of policy are all the way through to the tactical level. And I think that there are absolutely times where we've not understood the policy implications. How do you bring and balance that out? One of the policy things I think we saw was a big success, you talked about it today, was the Deputy Secretary of Defense's message to reduce classifications so we can get at information sharing. And we've done a lot of work in that, and it doesn't matter how much work we do, we'll run into meetings where, I'm sorry, you have to leave. And we have to get past that. We have to get to yes foreign instead of no foreign, and I think we're making big headway. That's a policy example of where we won. Transitioning into the commercials, or to the from allied to commercial side of the house is the commercial space policy that was just published and approved by the Secretary of Defense from the United States government. United States Space Command had a heavy hand in that. Because of so much work that we had done with commercial, we actually had a strategy and a policy at our command level and below that the DoD mirrored a lot of that work off of. And Space Force now has its commercial strategy. So that allows us to not just talk in different venues, but in a comprehensive way, if we use it correctly, to make that as powerful as we possibly can. So big advantages there. On the commercial side, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the commercial integration cell, if you're familiar with that. At Vandenberg, if you're not, it's a great opportunity for now 15 different companies to come in and do information sharing at high levels of classification to understand the threats, and help us just get a common sight picture on what our problems are and share ideas about innovation, capability development, and the rest of that. I think it's been a very powerful tool. JCO I talked about earlier today, and that was developed on my watch at JTFSD by some tremendous experts in the field like Barbara Goff and some others. I expected kind of a hush moment right there for those that know Barbara Goff. And just really groundbreaking work on how do we innovate, how do we work with commercial to get max benefit. This specifically focused on space domain awareness with over 80 different entities, organizations, however you want to call the different pieces of that. And you walk in and there's a VTC in the middle of the floor in Catalyst Campus that has 80 different faces on it. I guess 79, one of the faces is in the room. But they're all engaged and they're involved. And I gave a briefing to I think it was an Australian general officer that had come through. And we had a glitch. We had a problem in what we were trying to show them and how we were collecting space domain awareness. By the time the briefing was over, the team working together behind the scenes had discovered what the problem was, and it wasn't some small issue, it was a significant problem. Went through a vetting process to say, hey, we've got it, test it, see if this is right. And by the end of the briefing, they had fixed it. And they do that all day long, every day. They're using, I would call it baby steps of AI, machine learning, those types of things, but having real effect. And it's brilliant because it allows us to share that information with whoever we need to share that with the world because it's not classified. And what I've seen is a lot of bright ideas come in and turn into real capability fast. It's how we're going to have to operate in the future. So that's another example of commercial. We have 146 different commercial partners that are tied into assisting U.S. Spacecom, Space Force, other commands, other services, satellite communications, space domain awareness. How do we share information rapidly, quickly? And they're doing great work with that as well. There's so much more we can talk about on the commercial side, but let me shift for just a little bit to inside the military. You know, each service inside the U.S. military, and I see this in some of the other nations as well, has some level of space capability they provide. The preponderance comes from the United States Space Force. That's their job, that's their mission. And we need them to be as successful as they can. But the Army has capabilities. Navy has tremendous capability. I talked earlier today about if you have capability that's connected to the Navy, you just open 70% of the globe that you can get to if you need to for positioning. And so we look at the Marines. I've had great interactions with the Marines, and they provide tremendous support, and they're really getting into the space piece. And they give you frontline beach landing ways to be able to bring capability to the fight if you need that type of posturing. And they're absolutely reliant on those capabilities to be effective in how they fight. Not just the military services, but other civilian organizations, like we talked about Commerce earlier today, talked about NASA just a minute ago. The NRO and the IC community absolutely integrated at the National Space Defense Center and at our Combined Space Operations Center at Vandenberg and at our command levels headquarters. Absolutely critical to the way we operate. And we are learning new things from them, and they learn from us every day. It makes us better. In the SDA realm, we've already looked at through a lot of the different agencies how we use non-traditional capabilities, how we work with allies for different capability, posturing, where we're going to put the systems to be most effective. And because of that, we're filling those gaps rapidly as we see them developed. It's an area we need to continue to work with, so much more effective working together as teams to get after that. Academia is an area that we push hard on. United States Space Command has agreements with over 57 universities or different learning educations, think tanks, things like that, and that's growing quickly. And it has a lot of diversity. It historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic focused areas, tribal. We look at to bring ideas and thoughts from a wide array of the academic world and get great success with that. A lot of space is interesting to talk about. And I've always said, you know, one powerful tool of space, I think, in developing those partnerships is people want to talk about it. When you sit down, finances are very important. People don't like to sit down much and talk about finances as they do space. I'm sorry. That's just, the flames are bigger coming out of the back of a rocket than burning your pile of cash, I guess. But, and so we use that. I mean, that's actually, it's a good glue to bringing those partnerships together. What am I missing, Ben? Yeah. Smartest guy in the room right there. Missile defense, I talked about that earlier today, and that's an area that, so we work with the Missile Defense Agency and other missile defense related activities. The JFs, the Joint Force, the Joint Functional Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense at Schriever Air Force Base in Colorado. With the change in the tasking I talked about earlier today from the president, that organization shifted to us. When we did Nimble Titan, they led that effort. They've been doing that for years. But for this Nimble Titan, from different countries out of those 25, their space commands were represented. Their organizations that had a space part see that convergence. We didn't brief that. They see it, and they brought that together. So that's another place that we partner, different than we would have thought of 2 or 3 years ago. We continue to learn. We'll continue to get better as we move forward. So I think that covers a lot of the big parts that I would talk about SpaceCom, where we're looking at partnerships. There's a lot more to discuss. Happy to do that as we're here. And I think a lot of the panels have talked about other areas that we work toward too. As I went through thinking about the name of this is Space is a Team Sport, I changed the title. And if you've read Stanley McChrystal's book, General McChrystal's book, Team of Teams, that was a revelation for him after 9/11 in the special operations community of you had these very professional and expert cylinders in the Navy, in the Army, in different places, different organizations, intel that was focused on, you know, to support those kinds of operations. But there was no one place where they all really came together. And he built that. And I saw that in different opportunities on the battlefield. And when that thing was working right, it was amazing. Multiple targets, single night, change, work the intel. And it's just to see that run like it did is where we're going to get to. And some of the areas in space we're there today. We can operate fast like that. Have to continue. I've seen it on the battlefield where we took strategic space capabilities, used it at tactical levels, down to the support of an E-5 on the ground who had a medevac and needed different types of space level support, and we were able to make that happen quickly. I think we lose some of that when we get out of the face of a threat, and we have to make sure we keep that. And we need to make sure that's at the strategic level. Now, just to be clear, I am now rambling because that's not what I plan to talk about, but I think it's important. Let me bring this in for a landing if I can, and I'm happy to talk some more on the side as we get a chance and get our dinner. So change the name to Team of Teams. It's so important for the things that General Tedman and others we've talked about getting the operations. What are our objectives? It's one thing to have everybody get together, but it can't just be a club to meet. It's got to be, what are our hard military objectives? And we work on that to set that foundation. What are the requirements that support that? What are the real benefits, and how do we want to divvy up all these partnerships to kind of share the balance to be more effective, to be efficient, but really to be more effective? And so I think what we're doing now sets that in place. What happens if we have crisis tomorrow and we need to bring someone else in to the fold? It's kind of been on the outside a little bit. And I think there's a great example. And I wish I had known this Proxima was here because I got a clip I want to show you. If you haven't seen it, go look at Baker Mayfield's amazing comeback victory when he was at the Los Angeles Rams playing the Las Vegas Raiders. And that's in 2022. The LA Rams was on a 6-game losing streak. He came off the bench in the first quarter to play. Back to American football, not the round one, sorry. And found himself behind 13 points in the fourth quarter, managed to score with 7 minutes left. The Raiders came and tried to score. They got down close, but the Rams held them. But the punter put it on the 2-yard line, less than 2 minutes. So Baker Mayfield got his team together and said, I think we can do this. Let's go. They had things like trust. We talked about it today for what makes teams great. Had a high level of confidence, extreme competence in what they do, like we do in our areas and our fields. They had a passion and they had a common understanding. They had common goals, like-minded, in most of the things that they were pursuing, and they were after the things that mattered most. And so here they go. You know where this is going to end. And so some quick calls, quick plays, amazing footwork, reading the defenses, and connects with 10 seconds left, scores, and they win the game. But that's not the most impressive thing of what I just talked about. Some of you know what I'm talking about in the game. Baker Mayfield had been on a different team Monday. This was a Thursday night game. He showed up Tuesday morning and said, what do you want me to do? And said, fall in on a couple of plays. We'll talk about the 2 minutes and go through that scramble a little bit. But he didn't get much. At the end of his conference, and I'm sorry for this language, it's not that bad. Not for an Army guy, and the Navy guys will be fine with this. Sorry. He finished his press conference and he looked at one of the guys on his team and says, where the hell do I go? He didn't know where the locker room was at his home stadium. He was that new. How did that work? Because there was trust in each other. There was a common understanding of what the threat was. How do we operate? And you could plug and play and you could make that work. Now, what makes my story not so good is if you look at the rest of the season. We won't talk about that right now, but it was amazing. And I take great inspiration from that, to see that and to know it's more than just a football game. It's the human interaction. And it's that ability to work together in that type of crisis, because you are competent, you have trust, you're expert in what you do. And when the crisis comes, you can focus your attention and go. And that's what we have to do. The partnerships we talk about today puts that in place so that we can operate like that. If you get an opportunity to look at two things, and you have to do them in order, and then I'll get off the stage with this. It's Baker Mayfield's comeback, and there's one on YouTube that's like 1 minute and 20 seconds, so they get you through the 2 minutes pretty quick. But then you have to watch the Spanish TV version of that. It's the most exciting thing I've seen. When my team's getting a little down, put that thing in and going like, I want that kind of energy at our staff meetings, because the guy's phenomenal. And it almost makes it sound like a soccer game, so it kind of brings it back together. But so with that, I just would like to thank all of you for what role you have in our national security, from space, how important it is, and that your time and energy is absolutely not wasted. Again, I love what I do. I've been doing this for too long, but I can't quit because I have debts. No, I don't actually. I enjoy the work that I do tremendously, and I get to work with great people every day on stuff that really matters, and every problem is new. And it's just seeing some of the younger faces that they're going to take us where we need to go into the future. And you allow all that to happen. Every one of you in here has some part or play in that. And so thank you for what you do. Thank you for allowing me to come here and speak for a little bit, talk a little American football in Prague. And thanks for everybody that had a hand in putting this together. Thank you.